Hello and welcome. This is Troy Moliot, and thanks for joining Deal Junkie, brought to you by Commercial Real Estate Expert. And thank you very much for joining us. So we are in webinar mode here. We're live on Facebook, live on Zoom. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them into the chat there as well. And hello to all of you joining us now. So just want to go through couple quick things here. I am your host, Troy Moliot. I am a broker, investor, appraiser, developer, property manager, do just about everything commercial real estate. And I am the founder of the Commercial Real Estate Expert course. And it's just an honor to be here today serving all of you. And today is a guest speaker, Steve Gutzler. Steve is the president of Leadership Quest in Seattle. He is a leadership development company. Steve is a very sought-after speaker, has delivered hundreds, thousands of presentations. He's got a who's client list of Microsoft, Seattle Seahawks, Spotify, LinkedIn, Starbucks, Boeing, the FBI, you name it. He's done a variety of training and speaking. He is really an expert and leader in emotional intelligence. And he's got a new book out called Lead with No Fear. And we're now going to talk to Steve and just going to welcome Steve. Steve. Good to see you. Welcome. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. So wonderful to be with you and all your amazing audience.
Thanks for being here. It's been like it's been 3 or 4 months since maybe we've chatted a bit. And so, How are you doing? How is COVID? How are you coping with COVID? And what's going on in your life? Get us up to speed with Steve.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's 2020 for me, Troy, and I think probably for you, it was going to be the year of 2020 vision, right? We had it all mapped out. I had it mapped out professionally, personally. It was going to be my most significant year of travel, engagement, workshops, keynoting, all of that. And literally on my phone, I got notified that Governor Inslee, we were going to be the second state being shut down, being the epicenter. And I would say the first couple of weeks, Troy, I did pretty good. I was just triaging things, rescheduling, canceling. And then I got cast into what I think a lot of leaders have dealt with. I bet every one of your leaders, if they were honest, would say, yep, I've really struggled. And I would say personally, professionally, I've struggled. I went into what I call the stages of grief. I don't know if it was clinical, but I definitely had denial that this would be that impactful. There was anger that it would take a lot of my livelihood and freedom away. There was bargaining. I'm the master of maneuvering around crisis, but nope, it was shelter in place. So then it went into stage 4, which was profound sadness and grief. And I'm not saying I sunk into the depths, but I struggled honestly with my mental well-being and balance. And I've come to the stage 5, which I'm encouraging all leaders to get to, which is acceptance. And that's not surrender, but hey, this is a new reality. And just about the time we're seeing the end of the tunnel, we're getting new reports and cases and all of the unrest. So I would say right now, Troy, I'm doing so much better. I have shifted a lot, like you, to online. I'm encouraging leaders to identify their emotions. You can't have emotional intelligence if you don't identify your own emotions.
Yeah.
And really, it really has to do with understanding the emotions in yourself, how it affects you, but more importantly, how it affects other people. So I was on a Zoom training last week with 6 managers from Warner Brothers, and I asked them, hey, everybody, can you just describe your emotions in one word? And we did a virtual round the table. And these were the words they gave me, Troy: drained, anxious, fatigued, disturbed, stressed, and battle weary. And I didn't take that as a negative. I said, guys, I've felt all of that. I'm not saying I haven't had moments of joy and purpose, But the reason you're feeling that is you're a human being, you're not a machine. And we can't watch the things on television and see the impact of friends, community. I mean, I moved to Seattle, Troy, because it was the most livable city in the nation 30 years ago. Now look at it. And that affects my heart. That affects my mind.
Yeah.
So, long answer to the question, how are you doing? But I would say I'm at stage 6, which is meaning and purpose. And that really, I think, is the lead into why I co-authored the book, Lead with No Fear. And I'm really hopeful.
Yeah. No, I want to know, there's a couple of questions before I get into the book. And tell us what emotional intelligence is in a sentence or two. What is emotional intelligence?
Well, you'll look back on your career and I would say, what got you really established? And you would probably say, well, you were trained with your dad. Your dad was your mentor, right? So you had great mentorship. You had a level of intelligence and aptitude in that field. You were just telling me you got 6 screens in front of you. So you're like the techno guy, right? So we've got technology and IQ. I would say that got you in the game. How far you go up as a broker, how far you go up in, I bet you would say, Steve, it's been built by relationships. It's been built by how I could build a team. It's been built on how well I could self-manage my emotions under stress. So although your IQ, your technical skills will kind of get you established, I think how far you go up is EI, emotional intelligence. We used to call it the soft skills, right? It's really hard edge value. It's like how I manage my emotions, how those emotions affect other people, how well I am I self-aware of my personal impact. So all of those things are so critical with emotional intelligence.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What inspired you to write this book? And you this is your second book. You co-authored this one, and you have a book before this called Splash.
Yep.
And then I know from knowing you for the past couple of years, really 3 years, we've known each other. And personally in my own life, I've been in commercial real estate now for 30 years, and lots of accomplishments, but at the end of the day, I still needed a coach, a mentor, leadership training. And I sought you out about 3 years ago, and we started forming a relationship, and you've helped me in a variety of ways. And, we need that. We're always in a phase of being mentored or mentoring someone else. And so with that, what inspired you to write this new book?
That's so interesting because for the last 20 years, I've been in my business for 25, but I would say for the last 20 years, I made an observation in myself and other key leaders, Troy, and it's this, that although we want to make quantum leaps in our business and in our personal leadership, big leaps, big advancements. I used to write down big, hairy, audacious goals, right? Post them up on my office on big post-it notes. Here's my big, hairy, audacious goals. One problem, I would never really fully accomplish my big, hairy, audacious goals. What I began to discover is all the real change in my life and in my business was actually around 3-degree shifts. 3-degree shifts around strategic areas. So for the last several years, I've identified 7 areas in my life, 7 areas in the lives of leaders. Mike and I were discussing this book. We were dreaming about it, but we were in a Woods Coffee, good friend of you and I, Wes Herman, the founder of Woods Coffee. We were in a Woods Coffee in Bellevue. And that's when we knew we were going to be sheltered in place. And we said, we've been dreaming about this book. Why don't we write the book, Lead with No Fear, right now? The claim is a 90-day plan around these 7 key areas, okay? 90 days to change, 3-degree shifts, and we actually wrote and published the book in 90 days.
Wow. Yeah, you talk about in the book about this 90-day plan, the 7 shifts leaders make, and then making those shifts in little 3% changes and such. You know, you know me, I always want to make a 180-degree shift or a 90-degree shift. And so sometimes I bite off more than I can chew, or I drive my my staff and myself a little too crazy. And so I need something to manage. So talk more about the 90-day plan in the book, the 7 shifts that leaders make, and why 3%? Why not 30? I want to make a 30% change.
Well, you'll look back and you'll remember this when you went through your health crisis and your cancer and the dark days of that. And then when you began to see, hey, I don't think I'm going to die, I'm actually going to live. But in order to live and rehab and gain strength, I'm going to have to move. I'm actually physically going to have to move. I can't run 2 miles. I can't even run 1 mile, but I can walk 1 block. And you started getting up. You probably remember using your walker, right? And then like, okay, I don't need the walker. I can actually go to the kitchen. I can now go out on the porch and I can go to the end of my driveway. I mean, that's kind of a raw analogy, but I really think, and now like I look at your life, you've been on these mini triathlons and these things that probably 3-4 years ago would have been impossible. But you were determined to make 3 degrees. It's not running 12 miles. During COVID, you know what I did? I wrote down, I'm going to walk every day that we're shut down. And I only missed 3 days. 3 days I didn't feel particularly well, but I've walked every single day. Now, you know, those walks are maybe 2 miles, 3 miles. Yesterday I did a 5 mile. You stack that up for 30, 60, 90 days. Rather than gaining the COVID 15 pounds, I've been able to maintain the Steve Gutzler, you know, fighting weight reasonably well. So it's all built around these shifts, but the key is consistency, and the key is focusing on the key, you know, the right shifts, Troy. And I really believe these 7 are game changers.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And even, you know, for our audience, you know, commercial real estate, a lot of real estate people, investors, people from all over the US that, you know, log in and watch this. I mean, that's important because people say, man, I want to get into commercial real estate, and they want to jump right in and they want to be able to do it. But taking steps and working towards that and keeping with it, not just in and out, and making those little 3% shifts along the way are super helpful. And I say I make these giant shifts, but it's been a series of a lot of smaller shifts, as you're well aware of. But I think my mind wants to make big shifts and jump right in. That's my human nature. And so you have to do this in bite-sized pieces. And then after 90 days, wow, talk about a habit that's been formed. It's pretty amazing. So
yeah, and they stack upon each other, if that makes sense. So if I may, I'll give an example of one shift. The first shift is the most foundational, Troy. It is the one that I say has changed my life. It is the shift from victim to leader. And during the Great Recession, you can recall the Great Recession, that almost sunk my business. Because the first thing people cut is what? They're going to cut coaches, trainers, speakers. I mean, you start cutting, not fat, and then you start going down to muscle, and then you get down to the bone. Well, I was one of the first, you know, people they cut. And had it not been for Microsoft and a couple big clients, I probably would have been sunk. But what happened is it affected my mindset and my self-talk and my self-concept and my confidence. And soon I drifted into victim. I'm not talking true victimization. I'm talking about a victim mindset, vocabulary. And I grew up in a very positive home. So for me to find myself in that spot, I say it was my doldrums. The doldrums is a nautical term where the intertropical convergence zones collide and the winds cancel one another out. And if sailing ships would go into the doldrums, they would just float around in circles and die unless they received a second wind.
Mm.
I was floating for over a year. I was dying on the inside.
Yeah.
Negativity, poor self-talk, lack of confidence. I needed a second wind, and my second wind came in the form of an invite to go down to speak to a group of burn victims on a rafting trip for 4 days. An experiential trip with burn victims. And I went, and these were victims of 35 to 95% burns and scars over their entire body.
Mm.
And the very first day on the river, I never heard one negative statement. They had to cheer each other on. Some of these individuals had scar tissue so deeply ingrained in their bodies, they could barely hang on to the oars.
Mm.
I heard a lot of joy. I heard a lot of can-do spirit. And that night, Troy, God is my witness, I got up to speak to them. Now think of this, 35 to 95% of your body is burned.
Mm.
So some of them, one gentleman, roadside bomb in the war, fully burned, no ears, no nose, 2 beady eyes, totally red scars.
Mm.
Another young woman, 35 years of age, beautiful face on one side, the other face, fully disfigured and no ear.
Mm.
So I get up before them and I go, you know, when I got here, I was in the doldrums. And just watching you, observing you has changed me. And I want to thank you. I've never been around burn victims and I was nervous. Troy, God is my witness. I barely got the word burn victim out of my mouth. And a young man with a prosthetic limb lifted up his arm and said, Mr. Gutzler, in all due respect, we never refer to ourselves as victims. We are burn survivors, sir, burn survivors.
Mm.
And it took the wind out of me. And that night, God is my witness. I went back to my little cabin like I was in, grade school church camp, right? And I got out a journal and I started to eliminate words that I would allow into my mind and statements that would come out of my mouth. And I had to shift from victim. So I want to talk to every one of your listeners. Where have you allowed maybe COVID or this setback or this tough economy? How has that affected your mind and your words? The things that you say to your spouse or your children or your coworkers or your client. Mm-hmm. Listen, we attract whatever we say. And if we're saying poisonous statements to ourselves or letting that out of our mouth, it will create a dead end of results, right? Mm. So that shift, now I know this is a long example, speed forward 7 years. Last year I spoke at a keynote, and you'll appreciate this. It's your mentor, my mentor. John Maxwell was the lead-off speaker at the largest pharmaceutical conference in America. The number 2 speaker was Magic Johnson, Hall of Fame, NBA star. I was the closeout speaker. And before I got introduced, I was watching my own video on screen as they were introducing me. And you know what I thought? Had I not changed from victim to leader, I wouldn't be here today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, if you want true success, not just in 6 months, in 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, wherever you want to be, you've got to speak it and think it now. And that shift, Troy, is the foundation to the whole book, shifting from victim to leader. We give people practical words. They should, like, you'll never hear me say I'm tired. I can be tired. You won't hear me say it. You'll never hear me say I'm old, because, and I'm not being weird about it, but whatever you let out of your mouth, it reinforces, right? I always say every day is a gift. I feel inspired today.
Yeah.
So
and I think that is, I mean, in sales, no matter what you're doing, but even in our arena of sales and what we do on a daily basis, I think it's very, very easy to have a victim mentality. And when you shift that to leadership, I mean, it is game changing. And that mindset, having the right mindset moving forward, you can do anything. And I think that is really that is such a key piece that cannot be underestimated. And so, and with that, we need to surround ourselves with people, whether it's trainers, others, it's the John Maxwell law of the inner circle. You're only as good as those 5 people that are closest to you. We've heard that over and over again, and that is so true. And so I want you to speak a little bit as to why I need a mentor, why we need leaders and coaches and other people of influence in our lives.
Yeah, you're nailing it, because I think the very first question I ask leaders or a professional when I sit down with them, and maybe they're considering coaching, and I'll say, where do you really see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Where do you want to be, and where do you see yourself? And if they don't say the top 10%, I won't work with them. They may not say exactly top, but if they don't see themselves, the other term I often think about is summiting. If they don't see themselves really scaling and climbing and summiting. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be at the top 10, but they want to strive to be in the top of their field. Why? Because that excites me. I want to associate with clients and colleagues and inner circles that are summiting. So I think number one, yes, pick out 2 or 3 friends that are summiters. And that was my attraction to you. I remember we were a part of a mastermind group for 3 years, and we would meet every other month. And everyone around that table, even though we came from different industries, I think the one thing we had in common is we weren't coasting, we were climbing. Now, not everybody was on top of their game. Some of us were going through different physical issues, family, setbacks in business, but the target was there, right? And I feed off of that. I feed off of that inner circle. And I think, so be selective. Yes, everyone needs a coach. The greatest investment is a coach and mentor. Sometimes you pay for them, sometimes you find them. My son, who's in law enforcement and wants to be in the top 10% of his field, he's been a SWAT officer, he's been undercover narcotics, he wants to, be an influencer. He sought out a coach last year that I couldn't believe. I'm like, really? How can you afford that guy? He goes, well, I can't. And he goes, that's why I'm coming to you, Dad. Can you help me? And it was one of the greatest. He didn't ask for all of it. He said, I think I can afford half of it. Would you consider helping me with half? I think this can change my life. That was one of the greatest honors, that my son would say, I want coaching. And last week, he was in a Facebook group, or a group on Facebook, and he was telling me the type of people he's associating with. And he goes, Dad, the people I've met will be lifelong friends. So think about that. I'll spend $2,500 on a vacation. I'll spend, I'll get the upgrade on the vehicle, or, buy the air conditioning or whatever. The greatest investment I made 15 years ago, I went to Toronto and got certified in emotional intelligence. It cost me $3,500, $1,500 for travel and lodging, over $5,000 that I didn't really have. But I remember telling my wife, honey, I think if I invest in this, it will, be game changing. I've built a career on emotional intelligence because of that certification.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, good for you, Troy. You still seek that out. You're still looking for those mentors and coaches. So amen to that. Every one of your listeners, find the coach, find the inner circle.
Yeah, I think that's just so important. I mean, we have to, whether it's joining a leadership book club, which, we have at one of our companies, we're always trying to push forward. When you're stagnant, and you're treading water, it can impact your emotional intelligence. It can impact your mindset. And so constantly pushing forward, and it may not always have to be business 100% gangbuster, go, go, go. It can be something in your personal life. It can be relationships. There are multiple quadrants. And I know in past coaching sessions, we've sat down and growing that business is made just one piece of the pie. There are several other pieces of the pie that we have to do a check-in on and report and keep accountable on as to how am I doing in this area, and not sugarcoating it, because on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, I mean, there were sometimes some of those things were 3s or 4s in my life. And so, okay, this is eye-opening. How do I work on this particular area of my life? And having other people who have been through a trial or a tribulation, like the burn survivors, to give you perspective is just so invaluable. And so we learn from our trials. I've learned from trials. You've learned from trials. And so that is, those are important to build on. And so that's great.
And iron sharpens iron. That's the phrase we always use. Iron sharpens iron. And you want to be around people that sharpen you. I always ask the people I associate, I want there to be 3 things. Number 1, I want them to be people of character and in alignment with my values. I don't look for perfect people, because we all have weaknesses and flaws, but I want the basic core of their integrity and character in place. And I want there to be affinity with values. Number 2, I want them competent. I want them skilled and excellent, whether it be an inner circle or a coach. I want them to have a proven track record. And number 3, I want to enjoy them. I want there to be chemistry, right? I mean, I look back on a lot of fondness with a lot of our discussions, because it was fun. I mean, we would laugh, we would, joke, we would talk about the good times and the times where we're struggling. And that's the other thing with coaching. I think there's a accountability. The very first time I sought out a physical trainer, it was a love-hate, right? Because I was like, oh no, I got to go in and get weighed, and he's going to ask me on how my eating has
got
been.
homework. And I can't, the times you've given me homework, and then I got to do it, so.
Yeah, the homework. So that we need accountability, and I don't care who you are, we all need that. So yeah.
So and this has been great. So we're nearing the end. Couple more questions here. Fear is huge. I mean, we've got a lot going on in the world today in a variety of different areas, which is, challenge, and it can be good. Going through the fire is hard though. And so for those that, where I'm stuck with fear, it's a big theme in my life right now, or whatever it might be, what are some lessons or a step or 2 or 3 that someone you can maybe share with someone to maybe help them get out of the fear or the victim mentality and start moving and transitioning? What would that shift be, or what advice would you give someone who's just riddled with fear?
That's a great question. The first thing that came to my mind was an analogy, which is a analogy of the 2 dogs. And there is a dog. I used to have a Doberman. Unfortunately, we had to put our sweet Doberman down in December. And now I have a little Maltese. So we talk about going from one to the other breed. But think of 2 dogs, 2 fierce dogs that fight each other. One would be, let's just say, fear, and the other is confidence. And you say, there's a battle in my mind every day: insecurity, anxiousness, fear. And then there's like clarity, inspiration, and confidence. But these dogs are battling. And the question is, which dog is winning the fight? And it's what? It's the dog you feed the most. So if you feed that fear, if you dwell on it, it's going to catastrophize. It's going to, like a snowball, it will get larger. If you feed that confidence, that clarity, that inspiration, it will grow and thwart that dog of fear. So I say guard your inputs.
Mm.
Don't just listen to news. Don't just get on your smartphone and look at COVID updates. I used to watch the news at night. I loved the newspaper, but I actually discontinued it just because of the headlines. I would look at headlines and I would look at things and it would kind of affect me. And then I would watch the news at night. So I've guarded my inputs. I have what I call fountain inputs. Fountain inputs. What's a fountain input? What you read. What you read. Read it. Read a book. Read inspiration. Listen to things that are fountain inputs. There is not a day that goes by. I mean, we've talked a lot about this, Troy, about our morning rituals. And I had lost a little bit of my morning ritual during the early parts of COVID, but I'm getting really strict about my morning routines now. As far as my spiritual routine in the morning, I always have about 15 minutes of reading. I'm one of those rare individuals that will not jump right into email right away because I have a slight heart condition and blood disorder. And if I get too much cortisol in my system, it literally puts me on tilt. And my immune system goes down. I have to guard it mentally and physically. So I would say read to lead. And I'm not just pushing my book, but this is going to be a 90-day guide, a great summer read to inspire, to reset, and give you, I mean, we got case studies in here. Our good friend Wes Herman's in this book from Woods Coffee. We have 10 case studies. We've got a professor from Harvard Medical School that talks about lifestyle medicine, and she gives us all of the keys to health, mental, physical, emotional health. So that is how you tamp down fear and build up inspiration.
Which dog are you feeding? Who are you feeding more? And it's easy when you're in the middle and you've got all sorts of negative forces coming at you from a variety of things, and you can get overwhelmed quickly. And one thing you taught me many years ago, and maybe you don't even know you taught it, probably didn't even discuss it, but during our leadership sessions, you would always play a very soothing music during breaks and a variety of things. And so I will play certain music that's very calming during certain parts of the day, and it just sets that mindset for you, and it can calm you and get you focused. Because when you've got I don't know how many COVID updates you get in your inbox, I can't even keep up. And so that amount of info flow really can overwhelm you. And so being okay to not check email or staying in your routine. One of my first podcasts for CREE when COVID started was stay in your routine, making sure that you keep that routine something similar, whether you're at home or whatever it might be. Super important, because people get out of their routine, they get off kilter, out of whack, and it creates all sorts of other negative consequences. And so one of the keys to lowering stress is certainty. And a way to create certainty is to create a work rhythm and a restructuring of your days, because the more uncertain we become in our work rhythms, it creates more stress. So you're absolutely right, Troy. That's great. Well, last question. And again, we train a lot of people with commercial real estate, a lot of unknowns for people with tenants, commercial spaces, people, whether they can pay their rent or not. We've talked about a lot of different things, and I think a lot of this apply, but is there one last lesson that maybe you could share with some of our listeners that might help them in sales or in real estate specifically?
Every day, I choose an outfit. So in the first few days of COVID, my wife finally said, Steve, I'm really getting tired of waking up and seeing you in the same sweats every single day, right? I was wearing the same sweats. It's my old school, right? My gray sweats. And I wasn't shaving every single day. because it's like, I'm not even going to see anybody today. And it led to slothfulness. And I quickly remembered, hey, I got to get back to those routines. And so I literally keep the schedule like you said. I get up, I shower, I put on a reasonably good outfit, even if I'm not going to see somebody. In the same way, my final thing is just as intentional as you are to at least get up in the morning. And if you're a woman, you get up and you shower and you actually put on a little makeup and give your best for that day. In the same way, we have to, as leaders, as brokers, put on a capital A attitude. People are not attracted to negativity or flatness. They are attracted to optimism and hope and positivity. And the one thing my dad taught me is, Steve, every day, we worked in the restaurant business, he said, every day, bring a capital A attitude. Because the attitude you bring, Steve, is what our employees will adopt. And that's the attitude they will take to our customers. So at age 17, I learned that phrase, capital A attitude. And I learned to greet people with a smile. I learned to, when I'm on an airplane, which hasn't been for a while, I get to go on one Saturday, people will say, how was your day? And I would go, exceptional. And I'd be sitting next to a business person, they go, what? And I'd say, exceptional. And you know what they would say then, Troy? What's so exceptional about it? And it would open up an amazing conversation. If they said, how's your day? I mean, it's just a courtesy, right? You sit next, how's your day? Good, fine, end of conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to have a conversation with that person, but just the fact that you say exceptional, extraordinary, they'll say, why? And I'll just say, I'm able to meet some amazing people. I'm able to really live my passion.
Yeah.
And so I would say, be the person you've always wanted to be attracted to. Be the leader you've always wanted to follow.
Awesome. That is great. That's a great final word, man. You always inspire me. This is great. And I think people are really going to be able to react well to this. I mean, I can teach people cap rates, internal rates of return, commercial real estate, leases, this and that. But man, tell you, that may only be 10% of it. 90% of it is the capital A attitude, having the right mindset, shifting from victim into leadership type roles, leading without fear. Leading with no fear. And so I would encourage people to definitely check out Steve's book. If you can't afford the book, you send me an email, I'll buy you the book. So
that's awesome.
So Steve, this is Steve's book here, Lead with No Fear. He's also got Splash out there. And then for those of you that want to know more about myself, again, I've got my investment calculator here, CREE calculator. I always like to bring up this quote: the work you do today will prepare you for the opportunities tomorrow. So, and then if you need any more information on CREE, we've got our course there, our free case studies, and a variety of different tools and stuff that you can use. Steve, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry it's been almost 3 months since we've really chatted. This has been great. Awesome. Bless you and all that you're doing. I'm just excited to see the shifts and things that you do and you'll make. And for all of you out there, if you need anything with Steve, if you want to reach out to him, is it stevegutzler.com? Is that the way?
That's right.
The website is stevegutzler.com. And so this is his website right here, stevegutzler.com. And you can go to there and get any information about Steve and videos and stuff that he does there. But, I need mentors and leaders in my life all the time, 24/7. And Steve has definitely been one of those people in my life. So with that, thank you again, Steve. Appreciate you, and thank you to everyone else that joined us today. This has been Troy and Steve. Troy with CRE Broker, and make it a great day. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you, Troy.
Take care, everyone, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.